Thanks for joining me for another Towards Understanding podcast. A mum who is changing the world, not just for her own child, but for so many others. I like that. The founder of Milkshakes for Marleigh, Kate Fisher, joining us on Towards Understanding. G'day, Kate.
G'day, how you going? Thanks so much for having me.
It's wonderful to have you on. Now, you've got a podcast by the name Milkshakes for Marleigh. You've got a remarkable book that's out by that name. And also there's sort of, someone in your world who's pretty important called Marleigh as well. Could you talk to us about what it actually means? And then we'll dig into a little bit more of what you're doing.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. So I am the founder of Milkshakes for Marleigh, and I am on a mission to end persistent critical blood shortages in Australia and around the world, inspired by my now 9-year-old daughter, Marleigh, who has been dependent on blood products to survive since she was 3 years old. She's got a condition called autoimmune encephalitis, so it means that her immune system is wrongly identifying her healthy brain cells as foreign and attacking her brain. People often identify that as something similar to type 1 diabetes, where your body attacks your pancreas and it doesn't work anymore. Same thing for my little girl. It's an autoimmune response in her body, and her body's attacking her brain. And there is no cure. It is a life-threatening condition, and we have come very close to losing her quite a few times. But the only thing that preserves her life and saves her life in an acute setting is plasma infusion. So the only reason that she's still alive is thanks to the incredible generosity of Australian blood donors.
Now, maybe let's treat us as we know really very little. Someone goes, well, hold on, you said blood donors and plasma. Are they the same thing? What are they? What's the differences? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, so plasma is part of what your blood is. So as a blood donor, you can either go and give a whole blood donation, and they can take the plasma component out to make the intravenous immunoglobulin infusion that keeps my daughter alive, or you can just go and donate plasma. And plasma is something that you can donate every 2 weeks. You get the red blood cell return. They take the whole blood out, spin it around in their special machine, keep the plasma, and then give you your red blood cells back. Or you can do a whole blood donation once every 3 months. But either way, the medication that my daughter needs comes from the plasma that's part of the blood that people donate.
Love that that's the case, that it's so, there is this remarkable connection, which is, I suppose, exactly what you were wanting to do with both the podcast and the book, Milkshakes for Marleigh.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about that as well, because what I love is your creativity and the idea of what you're trying to do behind this. Could you talk to us about it, Kate?
Yeah, so, I think there's so many, the word change maker at the moment is such a buzzword sort of in our lexicon at the moment. If you jump on any social media or, media, change maker is a big thing that people are trying to identify as. And I really tried to break down what that actually meant. Being a change maker is simply developing a creative solution to a social challenge. And that's exactly what Milkshakes for Marleigh is. So I've created a space where instead of asking people to donate blood or asking if people are blood donors, because people then feel a little bit judged or feel like they're being recruited, what I do is I've created a space for recipients and their families to tell their stories. So in doing that, you never know who the person is that's donated the blood to keep either you or your loved one alive. And the reality is that 1 in 3 of us will need that blood within our lifetime to either keep ourselves or someone that we love alive. So I encourage people, next time you're sitting in your car with your loved ones or sitting around your dinner table at night time, just have a look around that setting. And if you think 1 in 3 of the people around that table are worth saving, I really encourage you to make a blood donation, because only 1 in 33 eligible Australians ever do it. And I think the stats are pretty similar in New Zealand as well. So by creating that space for people to tell their stories, they then get to thank their blood donors. So if you grab a copy of my book or listen to any episode of my podcast and you've ever been a blood donor, you can wonder if you were the one who improved the quality of life of the person who is interviewed on the podcast.
Kate, let's just talk through a little bit about how it came about too, because I like I said, I just love your concept, exactly what you said. I could just be out there and say, look, please do it, which is absolutely understandable, and you thought, let's do a creative solution. You know, I've worked in radio my whole life, so I sort of know the best ideas to go and set up a podcast or do some audio here or whatever else it was. Did you have a background around this, or did you just go, that's a great idea, I'm just going to learn it myself?
I have no business having the Australian Podcast of the Year last night through Osmanpreneur. The book's a #1 bestseller on Amazon. I have no business doing any of those things. I am not an author. I am not a podcaster. I think I am just a mum who desperately needed to keep their child alive. And I wanted to, instead of focusing on the disappointment and the despair of the fact that so few people were donating blood, I really wanted to focus on the incredible humans that were, and thank those people, because it's such an anonymous, thankless task, donating blood, but people just don't realise the phenomenal impact that they have. So one of the really amazing things that we've seen through the work that I have been doing is not just encouraging people to donate blood, because realistically there's people that can't, or there's people that can't at different times in their life, but it's people going back into their communities and asking a family member to make one donation, or it's people that haven't donated for a really long time, and if they're a little bit iron deficient, women in, you know, the childbearing age often are, they might be able to do a plasma donation instead. People reviewing their workplace policies to see whether they offer leave for their employees to go and donate blood has been a really big one, and then highlighting that to their employees that they can have a paid hour where they can go and donate blood. So I really encourage anyone who's listening to this to just have a check and see what your workplace policies look like, because so many places have the ability to donate blood as part of your paid hours. And if you don't, maybe ask if you can. I think so many of us understand that during a cost of living crisis like we have got at the moment, that we would often like to give money to different charities or different things we might have been able to do before, and increased cost of living and mortgage rates means that maybe we haven't got the capacity to do that in the same way. But you go and donate blood, you get a free milkshake, you get a free sausage roll or pie or whatever your snack of your choice is, and it doesn't cost you any money. Every time you sit down in that chair, you've got the ability to save 3 lives, and I think that's just an incredible thing.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the milkshake. Is that where Milkshakes for Marleigh came from, or is it something with Marleigh that she loves? Or
it is. So Marleigh is obsessed with strawberry milkshakes. So she has had extended periods of time in hospital, being tube fed, and when she's at her sickest, she lost the ability to walk, to talk, to be able to, you know, lift a spoon to her mouth. Her longest seizure ran for 39 hours. She has spent lots of time in and out of paediatric intensive care units. And the one thing that has always enticed her to try food again when we were teaching her to swallow again was strawberry milkshakes. When you go and do a blood donation, you get a milkshake. And that play on words was kind of just how the whole thing evolved on a really local level. When we were living in Canberra, was bringing us food to our front door and doing kind things for our family. And we got to the point where we didn't have any freezer space left for lasagnas. And so it started as a bit of a joke of, thank you so much for your kindness offering us food, but what we really need to keep Marleigh alive is blood donations. So go and get a milkshake at your local Life Blood Centre after you donate blood, milkshake for Marleigh. So that's where the pink zebra as well, that is the logo for our book and the podcast, came from, is that zebras are the symbol for rare diseases, internationally recognised. Autoimmune encephalitis is such a rare disease, and so we decided to play with that and turn the zebra into having pink stripes for pink milkshakes. And yeah, Milkshakes for Marleigh was just born out of that idea of sharing stories and being kind, really.
Love that. Has there, well, I mean, there is, but is there maybe one or two of the stories that you've featured in the book and the podcast that you could share with us as well? And I suppose that have perhaps had great reactions from people who've contacted you back.
Yeah. So I think what is important to know for anybody that listens to the podcast or reads the book is that not every person who is in the book is still with us. So that's one of the things that I've tried to highlight, is the incredible power of giving people more time in donating blood. Now, that can be more, years and years with your loved ones of extra time, or it could just be giving somebody an extra couple of days to say goodbye to their loved ones, wrap up their affairs, know that they've had the best chance at treatment to keep them alive. So I've tried to create an episode for everybody. So we've got everything from Joel Mason, who was bit by a shark while he was surfing and had to have blood transfusions on the sand. Otherwise, he wouldn't have even made it to the helicopter to survive. We've got Michael Klim on the podcast, the champion Olympic swimmer. He and Marleigh actually have exactly the same treatment. So his body is attacking his peripheral nervous system, and Marleigh's is attacking her brain. But Climmy and Marleigh have met a few times and talked about the fact that they have exactly the same treatment, and that's such a privilege to be able to watch them share that space. Climmy's a great guy. And then we've got things all the way down to, premature babies who have needed just that little boost when they've been in NICU, babies who have had blood transfusions while they're still in their mum's tummies, when they're still pregnant, people with cancer, autoimmune conditions. There's just such a variety of things. So I would encourage anybody, the book or the podcast are not in order. You can just pick it up and you can just have a look through, pick a chapter, pick an episode that interests you, and then you can get the feeling of it. You will see that there's a very light touch on the illness, injury, or reason that the person has needed the blood. And the majority of it is just like a love letter of these people thanking the Australian blood donors that have given them more time. So at the end of it, even if some of the content looks a little bit confronting at the start, it really should just lift your spirits in humanity. And we always, in our family, we've had lots of big challenges with illness and injury and disability and all sorts of things, but we just always encourage our family when things go wrong to look for the helpers, because that's where you see the best of the world. And that's really what Milkshakes for Marleigh has been built on, is that no amount of science or technology or medical advances can keep my child alive. It's the kindness and humanity of Australian blood donors are the reason that she's still here.
And I'm imagining that you've seen an outcome of that. The idea was to go and get a milkshake and do that blood.
Yeah.
Is there any way to, probably not, but is there an understanding of how much you have helped inspire people to go and do those
so
donations?
On a small scale, we know that we have got listeners to the podcast in 17 countries in the world now, which is pretty good for a little Australian-based podcast with no advertising budget. But I have been asked to speak internationally quite a bit about this concept. So I can't measure the amount of people that have donated around the world, but people who have been inspired by Marleigh's story can join the Milkshakes for Marleigh Lifeblood team. So when you go into Lifeblood, they will often ask you if you donate for a team. You can say Milkshakes for Marleigh is your team. And we know that over 10,000 lives have been saved in Australia by people who have donated blood to that team in the last few years. So I guess that's a small scale assessment of how much the impact has been. But to think that little girl in her little hospital bed at 3 years old who was having these seizures that were just ravaging her brain and threatening her life and taking her ability to do so many things, by telling that story, I know what it's like to be in a hospital room and to be terrified that not enough people will have donated blood to keep my child alive. And at her sickest, we could only prolong her life for 10 days at a time. I don't ever want another family to have to feel that way. And that's why I do the work that I do. And so we know that in at least 10,000 cases, we've prevented that from happening to other people.
Yeah, and I think you're right. That's the key word too there, at least, right? Like we know that's the minimum in that regards too. You did mention, asked to speak overseas. I think it was the Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson. You was asked to go and speak there. You've been, you mentioned earlier, you've won awards for all these sorts of things. So, and I reckon each of these must be moments that you just love to share the story and hopefully encourage more.
Yeah, so I was invited by the Duchess of York to go to the Women Changing the World Summit last year in London and to address that summit about the work that I do. And it's now being translated not just in terms of blood donation, but in other types of health advocacy, taking the approach that I'm taking. So one of the joys of the work that I do is also upskilling other people and capacity building other people that are doing blood donation advocacy in Australia and around the world. So that's probably one of the greatest joys that I have had, was standing on a stage in London and addressing that global audience, and took away some big awards as well while I was over there. At the moment, I am sitting as the Australian Author of the Year, and the podcast was the podcast of the year for 2024, which is very exciting.
Indeed.
But it's the incidental things, and I hate telling this story because it sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but it gives you an idea of the impact of this. Is that when I was in London, I got an invitation to go to the podcast show, which is the biggest podcasting event in the world. And I saw James Corden speak on behalf of SiriusXM. So they're the US-based podcasting network. And I was just standing with a copy of my book, hoping to be able to give it to someone in his team to get to him. And lots of people were waiting for autographs and stuff. And he saw the copy of the Milkshakes for Marleigh book, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, are you from Australia? Is that the Milkshakes for Marleigh book? You know, I've been listening to that podcast." And straight away, come out the back, you know, it's podcasting that's doing such a great thing. And so we went out to the back to the green room and had a chat, and just to see that brand recognition of that little pink zebra that came from such humble beginnings being recognised in a global context. And that, you know, you can't be sure how many people have, you know, read the book or heard the podcast and donated blood in other parts of the world. And I think that's just a really good example of that.
Love that. Kate, I want to ask you a question. I've been sort of going, how do I ask this question in the right way? But I'm just going to need to ask it. And I suppose that's really around, you know, you talked about that there's no cure for Marleigh, but if she keeps having these transfusion, then that keeps running for her and she keeps sort of at her finest health. Is that the case for the rest of her life? Like, is there this aspect that she can actually live till 65, 75, whatever it might be, as long as she can keep getting this? So that's remarkable, isn't it?
100% right. So in an acute setting, so when she has an acute relapse, so that's when we're talking about those really big prolonged seizures and she has lots of inflammation in her brain, those seizures can go anywhere from a few minutes to, as I said, her longest one lasted for 39 hours, and obviously that's a life-threatening situation. In an acute setting, the intravenous immunoglobulin infusion, which is made from donated human plasma, is the only thing that saves her life. Obviously, there's other life-sustaining measures as well, but that's the only thing that keeps her alive. Every infusion that she has in between those acute settings are what preserves her life and stops her from getting sick like that. So at one stage, the only amount of time we could prolong her life for was 10 days at a time. That was at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so blood donor rates were the lowest that they've ever been everywhere in the world, just because they had to be, because nobody could leave their houses and go and do it. So we were actually moving Marleigh to different states to be able to access the blood that she needed, because even though she was so sick, because the blood was being donated so recently, it was easier to move the kid to the blood than it was to get the blood to the kid, because we didn't know if it got to her by that stage, you know, how long it would take to get to her, whether she would still be here. So we were bouncing between Canberra and Sydney to get the infusions that she needed, which was lots of fun trying to organise to cross borders at that time and all of those things. It was a logistical nightmare, but it's just another reflection of the fact that had people not shown that incredible kindness and kept donating blood, then there's no way that we would still have her. And it's brilliant to let your listeners know that she actually turned 9 a couple of weeks ago. So that's 6 bonus birthday cakes that my child has been gifted by the kindness of others. And it's, her birthday every year feels like a really big milestone. And I can't believe that she's 9 years old now and she's doing remarkably well at the moment. She's at school part-time. She's just started doing karate, which is crazy. She's got her seizure response service dog, Paddy, who's with her most of the time. And she certainly holds her own with her big brothers. She's an incredible kid. And, any amount of time that we get with her is such a gift.
Yeah, exactly. And doing that work for so many others too. Final question as we do wrap up, Kate, I wanted to ask it. And this is around the understanding that perhaps we need to know to be able to go and give blood or give plasma, that sort of thing. I know that many, many years ago, I had chronic fatigue for a number of years, and there's been various times I've gone to give blood, and it's like, oh, well, I sort of can't because of that. And, and I'm never quite sure. You know, I always feel it's a bit of a guilt. Is there something I can do? Is there different ways around it? How is the best way if perhaps you know, to make sure that someone doesn't just sit there and go, oh, well, I can't, to go and check or to go and understand and to make sure, because, you know, I'm sure even just hearing your story or if they listen to the podcast, read the book, they're going to be inspired to do that. How do we, especially those people, a bit like myself, who go, well, we've had this, I've been told no in the past, how do I double check or go and make sure?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best thing that you can do, if you've got your phone in your hand right at the moment, is to follow Milkshakes for Marleigh on Instagram. So it's Milkshakes for Marleigh, Marleigh. You'll see the pink zebra. There is links there that will help you, or my website is the same, and there's links there that will help you as well. Or jump on the Lifeblood website just to register to become a donor. And when you do that, they have a little questionnaire that will pop up. And if you clear that questionnaire, chances are you'll be able to give blood. If you're not sure, then you can just call Lifeblood on 13 14 95, have a bit of a chat to somebody and ask them the questions before you've actually, gone in, made an appointment. Lots of the regulations have changed, so they've got so much additional support for donors now. One of the big examples people talk about is if they've been in the UK during the whole mad cow situation, they thought they could never be blood donors. A lot of that has changed now. Just the best thing that you can do is jump on, and I always say to people, if you can't be a donor, we understand that, but please join me as being a blood donation advocate if you can't. And that might just mean downloading an episode of my podcast and listening to it, telling somebody else about it, buying a copy of the book. It's available on Kindle as well on Amazon if you want to get it that way. Join me in that advocacy, and just if people after hearing this today can just tell one other person about Milkshakes for Marleigh or blood donation or something, it might just spur somebody on to go and do one more blood donation. And if you can do that, then you have helped to save 3 lives.
Kate, it has been wonderful hearing your story, your passion. I love your heart, not just for your own daughter, but then for so many others. And thank you for sharing that around the world. We wish you all the best with Milkshakes for Marleigh and, of course, for Marleigh herself as well. Thanks for having a chat to us today.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
Kate Fisher is the founder of Milkshakes for Marleigh here on Towards Understanding.
Share your brand, your event, your message across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand by sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Bielen. More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week, and with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.